It was Angie Dickinson is no stranger to love as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. Men came and went. Some brought happiness. Some people left nothing but sadness behind, but in the midst of the whirlwind of passing flings and affairs that make the news, there one man stood out from the "You can now rest at 93 with the knowledge that comes from living a full life." Dickinson, looking back and telling them they love them of her life. Who is this mysterious man? Us, as we pull back the curtains, humble, going back to before there was a police woman, before cameras that flashed, and famous what Angie Dickinson had already done. Some of the most powerful guys in the world in Hollywood, Frank Sinatra, loved her a lot. It was said that John F. Kennedy was thrilled because the people who cast her also chose her, for not because she was pretty, but because she could hold her own, strong, sensual, and the guys in her life are always in charge. Made news, but Angie made history. She wasn't just someone that guys looked at, was someone people looked up to. When Angie took on a part she didn't just play, she owned it. It was her big break as Sergeant Pepper Anderson, and a police officer was a big deal for more than just TV. It was a change in culture for the first, when a woman was in charge of an hour-long primetime show drama, and she did it with both power and style and charm. Angie knew how to use the. Not only did she know how to use a room, she was impossible to miss, but the story didn't start on a red carpet. Began in a small town on the North Prairie in South Dakota. Before the glitz, the dresses, and the sparkling flash of Angie Dickinson was caught on camera by Hollywood. Angie Brown is just a girl from a small town with lots of hopes and a spark that couldn't be turned off. Born in September 30th, 1931, in the quiet prairie town of the North Dakotan Culm, was in the middle of three girls in a German family that works hard. The girls' parents are from the United States. And Leo Henry Brown had deep roots in their neighborhood. Leo was a respected owner of two newspapers and manager of both. There was the Cull Messenger and the Edgeley Mail. Was a man of words and stories that would have a big effect on Angie, who would finally hold people's attention, not with pen and paper, but with the magnet, get her to show up on screen. From the beginning, stories were all around her. Brought up Roman Catholic and in a home where rules were followed. Imagine that her father was always the local Renaissance man, did more than just run the newspaper, but also worked as a projectionist at the only movie house in town. Angie often couldn't take her eyes off the silver, watching the screen, flashing black and white stories come to life until tragedy happens. Hit, and the theater still burned down. That was when the idea was already there. They were no longer just fun, for in 1942, they were magic to her. At just 10 years old, Angie's life changed. The Brown family packed up in a big way and left North America's Calm Plains, Dakota, for the sunny hills of. They moved to Southern California. Burbank is only a short distance from Hollywood, where the bright lights of the big city were still a long way from Angie's truth. She quickly showed she was 15 years old and more than just pretty. She finished high school at Belrine Jefferson High School 1 year after having won the 6th yearly article on the Bill of Rights. Take a moment to honor the journalism blood she had, whip smart in her blood. Articulate and driven at the start, planning to do what her father did. College followed in his steps as a writer at Glendale and Immaculate Heart Neighborhood College, where she got by 1954, a business degree. During that time, she worked at Bob Hope Airport, used to be Lockheed Airport, and even in a plant that makes parts for cars. Was humble work that Angie never saw herself as she was grinding above it. Then came 1952. Learning and taking in. Angie Brown changed her name to Angie Dickinson when she married football player Gene Dickinson. The name would last a long time. Dixon's marriage didn't work out after that. New role and fate, as it does show up in Hollywood stories. Annie suddenly walked into a local the first round of the Miss America contest and came in second, but it was enough to a person that you want to work with. A lucky break got her a job as one of. There were 6 beautiful showgirls on the Jimmy Durable show. With stunning poise and with her charm, she got people's attention even in a lineup of skill and beauty. From there, as the dominoes started to fall, a TV game, the producer thought she was great. Something more than beauty, a presence told her to try acting, and Angie did. The idea of really getting into the craft that has the heart of a student and a soul of an artist. It wasn't long before NBC asked her to appear, and she did. On the Colgate Comedy Hour and other. It was during this time, as shown by the range, that she met Frank Sinatra, who became one of her best friends for life. Close friends, a partner, and a confidant in the show business world is full of surprises. His first role was on New Year's Eve in 1954 in an episode of Death Valley Days, A Small Beginning, but it opened the door to something bigger, and Angie turned into it during the golden age of TV, taking on parts in everything from matinee to From the Theater to Buffalo Bill Jr. Police and the General Electric Theater. She could do a lot of different things at once. The next one was Hot and Soft. Her scenes in Gunsmoke over and over. She was right about the Virginia and Cheyenne. They knew how to ride horses, use guns, and take charge of a scene like the pros. By Dickinson was one of the most well-known names on the screen. Her first part without credit was in the 1954 movie Lucky Me, starred bright Doris Day. Blink and you'd miss her. It was the start of Miss Her Something Important over. The next, after a few years, she started to pile up supporting parts right from the start. She made it clear that she wasn't interested in following the road that Marilyn Ward down Monroe or Jane Mansfield. She wouldn't do it. Turn into another golden blonde bombshell shaped like a cartoon. Appeal Studios tried to lighten her naturally anyway, from thick, dark hair to soft honey blonde, just the right amount to fit the era's nice looks, but not enough to box her in. She had range and planned to use it. Her big break didn't come with a bang, but with a slow draw in a dusty Howard-made town, Rio Bravo, in 1959. Hawk's Rio Bravo was a major movie that made Dickinson seem like a real the Hollywood starlet who played Feathers, the card dealer who is flirty and catches the look of the rough-hewn sheriff, played by John Wayne. Dickinson himself was bright. She held her own against a Dean was in the powerhouse group that included Martin Nelson, Ricky Martin, and Walter Brennan, and she did it with sassy intelligence and a hint of trouble that made her from North Dakota. Never forget Prairie to Angie, a starlet. From Hollywood, things did not go as planned for Dickinson. Typical, she didn't fit the mold. Stayed away from clichés and became an icon not just because of how she looked but for how she handled each decades of movies and TV shows, changing and always in charge. Unforgettable part that Angie Dickinson played in. By the early 1970s, the police woman Angie Dickinson had already made a name for herself. She was able to find her own space in Hollywood. Well known for her seductive edge, she screen and an easy-to-move restart between bad guy grit and A-list charm. Even though she didn't need TV, however, TV called anyway. In March 1974, Dickinson was in a single, a rough episode of Police Story, a collection of stories known for its realistic fight with the police. The episode was a hit, and fans liked her too. Right away, and so did the network. NBC came back with an offer to play the lead in a based on a weekly show she has her own show at first, Dickinson didn't want to watch TV. Most of the women at the time had a reputation for making people too flat into stereotypes, but the makers a strong case for this job would be in a more important way. It would put in front of millions of people. I agreed to write every week. Later that year, Police Woman came out, in which Dickinson played Sergeant Suzanne Pepper Anderson, is a police officer in the LAPDs. She worked in the criminal conspiracy unit, sneaking around in different masks while looking into the city's worst crimes. Earl Holliman played her co-star in multiple movies. Sergeant Bill Crowley is in charge, with Ed Bernard and Charles Dierop as her fellow detectives from the start. Dickinson held the screen with power. She didn't play the part of it was hard to prove something. Pepper was sharp, calm, and understanding, a person who didn't have to yell at take charge, the crowd replied. Scores quickly went up for the show, becoming a big surprise hit not only in the US, but in places all over the world. A time when movie stars were women, Dickinson was more than just a strange sight. A change. It was a surprise. She got 3 Emmy wins in a row for award for Best Lead Lady in a drama series. She ran for Police Officer and won a Golden Globe for 4 years, and at its height Dickinson turned out to be one of the women on TV who are still, after many years. Success cost a lot. In a 2019 conversation, she talked about the show with a bit of sorrow. The shooting, the routine was never-ending, and the pay was not impressive, and the time investment that she had to turn down parts in movies that could have helped her career going separate ways. There was also the constant pressure to keep her. "Are my legs being used?" she once asked. "Well, that's all I have to say," he joked. Sell. Even though she had some clever ideas, Dickinson was often put into scenes by her writers. That put a lot of pressure on her body, something like taking a call while she played while taking a bubble bath. As they went, but the stress between the characters' depth and the industry's people always had high hopes for the police woman had a big effect on many people. More than just ratings, police stations across their country saw a rise in applications from women, many of whom were moved by what they saw on TV. Pepper Anderson didn't just play a part, she became a something that women could do and where that they could fit in. Dixon knew that she had helped shape a culture moment. 1987, when the LAPD launched the department, gave her an honorary with a smile. She took the doctorate. "You can call me Dr. Pepper now." And after, when the show stopped in 1978, she went back to the part for both jest and nostalgia, bringing back Pepper Anderson for NBC's Ringo Show with John and Ringo Starr Ritter, and making fun of her own looks in Christmas shows with Bob Hope, and a 1987 Saturday Night Live episode Angie Dickinson's rough love life. Balancing a well-known job and a very private life is a tightrope few in Hollywood walk with style. For Angie, their family often came first, even when the camera was about to pull her in a different way. Before she became well-known, Angie got married in 1952. Jean Dickinson was the star of the football team at Glendale College. Were in love in college, but there they split up in 1959. The same year she obtained her first major part as Feathers the Friendly Gambler in Rio Bravo. That performance made her look like a sign and marked the start of her business rise in Hollywood during the years that people were interested in her personal life. Almost as much attention as her screen roles, that Dixon was romantically linked to some of the most powerful men in American culture, among them Frank Sinatra, who she worked with in Ocean's 11, said to be President John F. Kennedy, but which relationship would best describe when she turned 18 in 1965, she lived alone. Married the famous musician Burt Bacharach. "The person who hit me like a little. What the world needs right now is prayer. Love." They were married for 15 years, a length of time that doesn't happen very often. In the Dixon once worked in the showbiz world. She said she was crazy about Bacharach, and for a while the couple dealt with fame, desire and love with remarkable grace. In 1966, they had their only child. "I had a girl named Nikki who was born 3 months early and weighing only 1 pound 10 oz. Nikki's life was in danger. Dr. S told her chances were not good." Burt and Angie watched their daughters make progress hour by hour and remember each small accomplishment. "I added an extra ounce day without a problem. Nikki got through it. But the problems kept happening. She later started having trouble seeing and was finally found to have Asperger's sickness. Because of what Dickinson went through changed everything about job choices. No longer just screenplays or stories. This time it was about how close they were to home. She began to turn down some jobs, giving them big chances to be more present. Among them was the famous taking on the role of Hot Lips Houlihan in MASH. She gave up because it would have spent too much time away from her daughter. Even after she got their police officer in 1974, she made sure there were limits. Dickinson wouldn't work extra hours. They chose to be home in time to Bacharach and Nikki's dinner, please. A rare stance in a business world. Many hours and a lack of clear personal lines for Dickinson, though. Home life wasn't something to fit between. It was the center of everything else. Her choice to put family first, leaving behind the kind of movie parts that could have been hit. She moved up the Hollywood ladder, but she didn't seem to feel bad about it. Actions showed that she was a woman who got it. The price of fame and made a choice how and when to pay it. Before the police made her a star, Angie Dickinson made one thing very clear: didn't want to be better known than her husband, but that's what happened. As Angie's career took off in the mid-1990s, 1973, Burt Bacharach was going over rough seas. Business level, he hit a rough patch the most when his friend worked with Dionne Warwick and sued him during a contract argument at home. The cracks were started to show too. Despite her deep, she once admitted that she loved Bacharach. It was love at first sight for her. One really giving up what she asked for. Sets clear rules at work. No weekends, extra work and no night shoots. If she couldn't help it, she'd end the day by go home right away and cook dinner for Burt and Nikki. their daughter friend and co-star Earl Hulleman once made it clear that it was hard on Angie. It was her job to keep a successful American TV show, A Marriage, and the strain could be seen by 1976. Just 2 years after policewoman Angie and Bert had quietly started living apart from. The marriage wasn't over, at least not yet. The truth was, they were no longer living the same everyday life. Bacharach. He spent most of his time at their beach house in Delmare while Angie stayed in where they live in Beverly Hills with Nikki. Friends thought it was a strange plan. Even though Angie didn't agree, she made it clear they were working through it in their own way. We're seeing each other, I still people, she once said. Think of myself as married to Bert quite a bit. I'm married, I love and adore him. There was still a sense of loyalty, but after 5 years, they still couldn't stop the slide. They split up and got divorced in 1981. She said she at least partly blamed herself. She worked too many hours, and if the roles were switched, she would have gone too far and got married in the end. Songwriter Carol Bayer Sager said they wished him well and knew that he wanted to talk to someone who got him on a level she never quite reached. Their bond was never fully broken. Broke up with Angie and kept his pictures around the house and how much they loved Nikki stayed the main thing that connected them. Inc. was interested in songs like she played the drums for her dad and had a wonder for science, nature, and the world around her. She was very different from her mother. Angie once remembered that Nikki had told her they'd never be just as feminine, a moment that stuck with her even after years of fighting trouble seeing and Asperger syndrome. Nikki found an important thing to do in learning rock science at Cal Lutheran. She went to college with her dad's help. Was able to get her degree, but her eyesight kept her from beginning her work in the field. In April 2012, Nikki killed herself in her room in Thousand Oaks. She was 40 years old. The details broke my heart. She used a plastic bag and gas to kill herself. Looking to be Bert's spokesperson later said peace from the mind and heart. Her weight had been on her for a long time. Quietly and peacefully killed themselves to get away from the damage to her brain brought on by awakeners. The statement Nikki loved science, as you can read in Glacial, looking at meteor showers, earthquakes, and cat sunsets, and Bert had even written about Tahiti, a 1969 song for her called Nikki, long before they fully understood her struggles, and her death was a terrible blow. A bad blow for both parents, but for Angie, it was that kind of pain that never goes away. The loss put an end to a hard part of a life shaped by fame, by giving up something and staying quiet. Love of a mom who never gave up by showing up. Angie had to deal with there was a sad part of her life there. There were still sunny times when she fell deeply in love with who this man was, the love of Angie Dickinson's life. Of her life, but not the man she married. Frank Sinatra and Angie Dickinson were together. An intense relationship that went on and off, went on for 20 years despite their deep bond and love for each other. Never got married to a love as serious as theirs, but still some things stood in Sinatra's way, who was married more than 4 times in his life, went in a different direction with Dickinson. The later policewoman star said that she and Sinatra really thought about marriage, but in the end it never happened. Even though she talks about him because he was the love of her life. She agreed that there were reasons she couldn't. Yes, their story began in 1953 when they met behind the scenes at the Colgate comedy show. Dickinson was married at that time. She married Gene Dickinson for the first time. He was with his second wife at the time. Sparks still flew between Ava Gardner and Sinatra asked if she was taking a picture, and when should I take your anyway, she gave him their number. Chemistry showed up on the screen when they were both in Ocean's 11 together. 1960, Dickinson played Danny in the same year as Ocean's wife Beatrice. From then on, she got a split from her husband. She kept in touch with Sinatra. Sometimes in a loving way, sometimes as close friends who always have a bond that wasn't easy to define. In a 2016 talk with Studio 10, Dickinson thought about their friendship. He was the man I care about most in my life. They dated on and off for a long time. They even talked about getting married. In a chat with Fox in 1964 News, she said, "We did talk about we were so at ease with each other they didn't really need to do it. It did come up a few times, though. Didn't like it, I wouldn't have. I was ready to take on that task. She said that Sinatra's task was living a nightlife. He went to bed at early in the morning. She told Entertainment Weekly, "I loved him so much. He was great, he was the love of my life for sure. Even though I didn't want to be." Sinatra had his own. He once said he had doubts as well. She said, "I'm not going to marry a." Dickinson laughed at the irony, since he later got married actor Mia Farrow in 1966 and had been married to Ava Gardner before. When they talked to CBS Sunday Morning, Dickinson remembered telling her, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want that to happen." She added, "And I didn't want to marry him because I didn't want him to ask me to refuse to work with Frank Sinatra." By getting married, their bond lasted until Nixon went. After Sinatra's death in 1998, she married musician Burt Bacharach in 1965. Today Dickinson thinks of Sinatra, "He was, said with love and a smile, the love of my life," she told Fox News. "It's nice to remember him. The very best ability, to say the least, when you look at how he can act, and he didn't always take risks. Sing, he might have been able to sing, though. Anything," she added with love. "He was also a very interesting man. Tough, wonderful, brave, and stupid." The end of their love story might not have been marriage, but it's still there, leaving a mark, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes the most important the connections that don't stick to the tried and true way. The story of